I just never understood cults. Like, how do people get wrapped up into it? How is it going today, Lawyers? Ken, my name's Dwayne.
My name's Jasmine.
We're doing Jazz. Today we have the scariest cults ever.
I don't like cults. It's something about cults that's just so scary to me.
Yeah.
Like people just worshiping somebody like they're a god, and like they just do like, I don't know how people fall into these things.
This is vulnerability. I don't know. But anyway, let's dive on.
They always do creepy stuff.
They do.
Hey, what's up, you
like
guys?
sacrificing chickens or goats or something.
Is about the world's scariest cults. So I've been obsessed with cults for pretty much my whole life.
And they always end up in death.
I mean,
every time.
Heaven's Gate, which was a cult where they all killed themselves because they thought that would get them to another planet. I did a video where I was eating food that you would eat if you were in a cult.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about 3 of the scariest,
cults
of all time.
Worms and peanut butter jelly sandwich.
So I'm warning you, it's going to get really graphic and really intense. And I'm going to go really
grab your teddy bears.
Yeah.
Because they're so crazy. So get ready. First, we're going to be talking about what happened to the Matamoros cult in 1989. Now, this event was so fucked up and so shocking that the whole world was talking about it. Even Oprah did a whole episode dedicated to it.
Oh,
wow. My guest today came face to face with the most hideous acts a human being can commit.
Oh.
When a drug smuggler's worship of evil led to the human sacrificial slaying of Texas student Mark Kilroy and 12 other victims.
So here's what happened. In 1989, a 21-year-old student named Mark Kilroy went missing while on spring break. Him and his friends went to a place in Mexico called Matamoros. Now, this was a really popular spring break destination. I think over 15,000 people go there at once. One night, him and his friends were hanging out at a bar called Garcia's. He left his friends for just a minute to go pee behind the bar, and that's where he disappeared. Now, his friends were so freaked out when they couldn't find him that they got American and Mexican police involved. Now, this became a huge deal. The media was talking about it. It was on the news. Everybody's wondering where Mark went. And his family and friends were hoping that maybe he would just pop up somewhere and have like a funny story.
No, that's not funny.
Lost and I was in Mexico.
Not funny at all.
That would not be
but
funny.
here I am. And unfortunately, that did not happen. Now, as they were looking for Mark, a psychic came out in an interview and said that they had a vision of seeing Mark next to a big cauldron. Now, if you don't know what a cauldron is, it's a huge pot that witches use to like brew their spells. Now, just a few days later, the police were tracking a drug dealer, and they were following him to this ranch. Now, they thought when they got to the ranch, they were going to arrest him and find all the drugs and find the drug dealers and, just arrest everybody. Now, what they found was much worse than that and fucking terrifying. Now, on the ranch, yes, they found drugs, but behind the ranch in a shed, they found something much darker. When they walked into the shed, they saw melted ritualistic candles, dried garlic strings, a machete that was splattered in blood, and the scariest of all, 4 massive cauldrons that were filled with blood and human body parts. Yeah, the family that owned the ranch was doing drug deals in the front and was practicing black magic in the back.
Oh my
God.
God.
The magic they were practicing is called Palo Mayombe, and that involved human sacrifices, which ironically they were doing because they didn't want the cops to find their drugs. They thought if they killed and consumed people like they were food, that the magic would work and the cops would never find them. Now, in the cauldrons and outside the ranch, they found the bodies of 15 people, including Mark. Now, practicing the magic on this ranch was a cult, and the leader's name was Adolfo de Jesus Costanzo, and he went by the nickname The Godfather. Now, the police didn't just find bodies in the cauldrons, they found bodies mutilated all over the ranch. And they said it looked like the bodies had been worn, like they gutted them and put them on like clothes. The cult members drank their blood, ate their organs, and all of this was done because Adolfo said that if they did it, it would give them supernatural powers. And one of the supernatural powers was being invisible to the police so they could get away with all of their drug deals. So here's another look.
That is crazy.
This is a look at the killing field.
That is crazy.
Where Mark Kilroy and the others died, on a small ranch outside of Matamoros. Mark and the 12 other victims had fallen prey to the demonic tactics of this man, Adolfo de Jesus Constanza.
Now, after all of that was found and all the evidence was taken in, the ranch was burned down to the ground. They were hoping that it would burn down and that would give the community peace. Now, the leader, Adolfo, fled to Mexico City with one of his followers, and the cops found him in an apartment building
dead.
Him and his follower both killed themselves.
Committed
Now, when the other
suicide.
cult members were found and questioned by the police, they admitted to everything, and they had no remorse. One of them even said while they were on trial, "Go ahead and shoot me. Your bullets will just bounce off." They thought that they were still invincible because they had eaten people.
Okay,
all
well,
14
there goes
members of the
reality.
cult were convicted, and they are serving life sentences in prison.
Good.
Okay, so this next cult we're going to talk about was in Uganda, and it's called the Ten Commandments cult.
Oh, that.
Oh,
I don't like that
God,
name.
yeah.
So this was a religion that was started in Uganda. It was started by ex-priests, ex-nuns, and one former prostitute. The leader of this cult was a man named Joseph Kabateri. Now, for Uganda's standards, Joseph was pretty wealthy, and he built a place for his religion.
Of
And he would
course.
pay for radio broadcasts to play his message to get more people to come to his compound. Now, what his religion stated was that he had a vision that the world was going to end on December 31st of 1999.
Oh, I was
Now,
gonna
if
say
you wanted to be a
2012.
member of this religion,
Or
this cult,
Y2K.
this is what you had to
Yeah.
do. You had to give them any land that you owned, and you had to give them all the resources you had.
What?
If you did that, you would get faith healing, 2 meals a day, security, and a promise of eternal glory in heaven when the world ended on December 31st.
No.
Now, people were so
Well, everybody
scared of
thought the
ending.
world was gonna
And
end.
seeing this man who had money, who
But yet here we are.
built this compound was so exciting to them that they believed it. And all of them were really poor, so the fact that they could get 2 meals a
Yeah,
day
'cause they were barely
just for
getting
joining
one.
religion, they were all in.
Yeah.
Now, some other things that they had to give up were sex and even speech. And if you had sex or spoke, you were punished. You could be separated from your families.
You couldn't
or
speak?
you could be beaten. So things were going along. You know, he had all of his followers doing manual labor, doing things for him. He was kind of like a god. And then December 31st, 1999 happened.
And then-
The world
did
didn't
not
end.
So obviously a lot of people were pissed and confused, and they were questioning whether or not this religion was real, whether or not he actually had a vision, and maybe he was lying. Well, he changed his story, and he said, actually no, the world is not ending today, but on March 17th of 2000, Virgin Mary is going to come back, and she's going to start the apocalypse. Now, a lot
What?
of them believed him, so they stayed, but what they didn't know was that date was actually the date that him and the rest of his founders were planning on
Killing
all
themselves.
of the followers.
Yep.
Now from December 1st to
Damn.
March
There it
17th,
goes.
when Virgin Mary was going to come back, he started selling some of his property off. He started getting ready to peace out. But the members had no idea what was going on. But if you were a member and you did question what was going on, he would send you to death. Well, then March 17th happened, and it was awful. He asked members of the cult to congregate in different areas of the church, and then he would sprinkle them all with gasoline and tell them it was holy water. Then
Oh
he
my
would
God.
lock the door to the building, and they would light it.
And lit it in fire.
The entire building.
Oh, that's their bodies.
All of the members died with it. When the authorities came, they found 778 bodies, and most of them were charred beyond recognition. Now, the weirdest part, Joseph killed himself with them. He wanted to die with his members, which is confusing because he knew that it was all a scam, but he wanted to go out with it.
But that's how it
Some of the
usually
other founders
goes.
of the religion are still out there, and nobody has seen them.
I just don't understand
Okay, so this
why
last
people
story
join cults
is
and
very
how people
very
get members. How?
complicated, So stay with me. But it
They
is
prey on
a mindfuck.
people
This is
that
the
are, like,
cult of a
struggling.
man named David Koresh. So this story starts with
I
a
heard of
man
him.
named Vernon Howell. He belonged to a church called the Seventh-day Adventist. So he had a really tough childhood. He was bullied and beaten. So he gave himself entirely to this church. The church owned a compound in Texas called Mount Carmel. So he entered Mount Carmel in 1981.
And he always
and
looked
met one of
creepy.
the prophets, who was one of the highest-ranking members of the church.
She
Her
looked
name was
evil.
Lois Rodin, and he and her fell in love. Now, she was 70 years old, and he was very young, but he said that God made him feel like this was okay. Now, Lois had a son named George, and he was not falling for it. He was
Yeah.
pissed because he was next in line to take over the church, and he thought that Vernon was coming in, falling in love with his
Mess
mom,
up.
and trying to take over when she died. Now, George was even more scared because the rest of the church loved Vernon. They were falling in love with him, which made it seem like he could really take over. Now, over some time, Lois, Vernon, and George started to fight. They all wanted power of the church. They all wanted to be in control. Well, instead of staying and fighting, Vernon decided to leave. Now, when he
And make
left,
his own.
he decided to get his own followers
Yep.
and start his own religion. And his religion was much darker, much more radical, and much more focused on an apocalyptic future. Now,
Always.
he claimed to be
Again.
the Messiah, and that he had seen a vision of the future. so he changed his name to his biblical name, and that was David Koresh. Then he started illegally practicing polygamy and started taking all of his followers and turning them into his wives. Now in 1988, Lois died, and David showed up to the church with all of his wives, his followers. And his plan was to bring his followers and take over the church and bring all of his views to it. Now, of course, George, the son of Lois, is still there, and he's like, nah, man, fuck you.
Yeah.
My church. So then they get into a war, and this is where things get really fucked up. George decided to challenge David in a very bizarre way. He wanted to have a challenge in front of both of their followers and see which one of them could resurrect a corpse. That's right. If you could bring a dead body to life, then you could be the new leader of the church. Well, David leaves because he does not want to be a part of this.
What?
He gets an idea. He decides that he's going to contact the cops and tell them that George is doing illegal things with corpses. That way, George can get arrested and he can take over the church. Well, the cops told David that he needed proof because they didn't believe him. Well, David and his followers decided to go to Kmart, buy a bunch of guns, and go back to George's
sell guns
chapel,
at Kmart?
put the gun to him and say, take a picture with that corpse so we can give it to the cops. Well, when David and his followers got back to the chapel, George knew what was going to happen, so he had a gun of his own. And then they all got into a huge gunfight. Now, nobody died, but there was a bunch of injuries. Now, David and his followers were found not guilty by the cops for some reason, and this made George go fucking crazy.
One of his followers was
left the church. Left. Then George started spiraling into insanity. It was all just too much for his brain to handle. 2 years later, he killed his roommate with an axe because he was convinced that David sent the guy to kill him. He's like, my roommate's gonna kill me. David set this up. So he killed him in the middle of the night with a fucking axe.
What?
After that, he was sent to a mental institution.
Yes.
He died a few years later. So you're probably wondering what happened to David. Well, since George left, he decided to take over the church. He gets rid of all marriages. So now all the women in the church are his wives. Now some of the members were so freaked out and pissed that they left and they went to the cops. But most of the members trusted him because he said that he was having visions from God and that God told him, hey, no, I'm supposed to have all these wives. This is what's supposed to happen. He also wanted them to have a lot of weapons. So David started hoarding guns and explosives, kind of turned the whole place into what looked like a military operation. But they all went along with it because it's what God said should happen, supposedly. Then a couple other members left because they were like, this is all getting too fucking weird.
Yes.
They notified the ATF. The ATF is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives.
There you go.
So now the FBI gets involved and they want everybody to come out of the building because they assume that all these church members are just hostages. But the church members are like, no, we want to be here. We're doing God's work. So this turned into 4 weeks of the FBI trying to get them to come out. And they wouldn't. Well, finally the FBI got fed up, so they wanted to raid the building. And as they were raiding the building, something happened.
They set themselves on fire.
Now, some theories are that the church members lit it on fire themselves because they wanted to create a wall of fire between them and the FBI. Well, that plan did not work out. Fire erupted, and it killed 75 members of the church, including 25 children. And in the middle of the fire, David shot himself in the head so that he wouldn't be burned alive. That one is like fucking crazy. I can't believe that happened in the 80s. Like the fact that that happened not that long ago is crazy. And cults are still around today, and stuff like this does still happen. We just don't really hear that much about it. So take this as a cautionary tale. If you are ever asked to be a part of something that seems shady, or you are ever taken into a church that seems like there's something weird going on, trust your gut, because you never know. It might be a cult.
Okay, I just never understood cults. Like, how do people get wrapped up into it?
It's because they prey, like the leaders prey on the weaker. I wouldn't say weaker minded, but like weaker, like people in bad situations, I would say. Like if they're struggling like to feed their families, or they just want or they'll make it so like to believe that like some big catastrophe is gonna happen and I'm the only one that can protect you.
Like a savior, right?
Yeah, like they're like an angel from God or something like that. And like if you want to live, you got to do what I say, and you got to do what I tell you to do, and everything like that. And some people believe that stuff.
Wow.
People believe it.
Whew, that's a little too much. This was heavy.
Like I can't.
This was really heavy, man.
Yeah. And it's like they all like I don't like it because you're not a god, first of all. Second, all of them seem to end up in suicides
And death.
Like,
So-
it doesn't matter what they're promising you. Oh, you're gonna get this, you're gonna get this much money, you're gonna live prosperous and all this stuff. You end up dying. You end up dying in the end.
Yep.
That's where the phrase "don't drink the Kool-Aid" comes
Oh, right, yeah.
like, because the Kool-Aid has poison in it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
and
who
it
was
makes you
that?
die.
Who
It
was
was
that? Jim
another
Jones.
Cult, yeah, it was
Jim
another cult
Jones.
leader, and he killed
No, we're not talking about the rapper.
No.
Jim Jones.
He killed a lot
Yeah.
of people all at the same time by making them drink Kool-Aid.
And he was saying he was Christ.
Yeah.
He was Jesus Christ.
And
himself.
saying, like, you know, you'll come to the new world or whatever like that, or something like that. And everybody drunk the Kool-Aid, and the Kool-Aid had all poison in it. So all of them drank it, and all of them died. So it was just
bad business.
just
don't do it. Just sit here and watch our YouTube videos and just be happy. but anyway, guys, please comment below. So you think?
don't forget to like,
Subscribe.
share.
It's just more, guys. Deuces.